Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Una, training consultant and AI innovation lead here at Right Group. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll be exploring a question many organizations grapple with: why so much learning or even some learning fades after training, and what can we do to make it stick? I'm delighted to be joined today by Steph Croxford, a senior learning and development leader with extensive experience helping organizations turn learning into meaningful workplace change. So, Steph, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, as always, folks, anyone who has joined us previously will remember to pop your questions into the little Q&A function. It should be in the middle bottom of your screens. Pop them questions in at any point, and we'll aim to get through as many of those as we can at the end of today's session. And also just a reminder that after the session today, we'll send you a recording and a few useful follow-ups, like how you can get in touch with Steph and also what's happening at Right Group. Okay, so let's get straight into it, Steph. When talking about learning that sticks, what exactly do you mean by that phrase?
I think we're talking about, that more formal learning around skills and behaviors. And so when we're talking about it sticking, it's whether you're actually people are making a change. So are they actually implementing that learning? So that skill or behavior they're learning in the session, are they going away and putting that into practice and changing the way in which they do things, or the way in which they approach things, the attitude, the behaviors, etc. So I think that's what I mean by learning stickiness.
Yeah, it sounds funny. And ultimately, it almost sounds like we're talking about learning that's going to last, that's going to stick beyond the workshop or whatever session it is you've intended, and hopefully become part and parcel of how people work every day and really improve their work. So why is it then, leads us nicely on to, why do you think learning sometimes feels like it's gone in one ear and out the other? What might some of the reasons for that be, Steph?
I think there are lots of reasons, and I think it's different to each individual and potentially each business as well. But I think the first thing we've got to look at is ourselves as learning and development leaders. Is it relevant? Are the right people in the room? Is it engaging? Is it practical? I think we've got to look at how that's set up in the first place. I always say to people, if you don't need to be there, you don't need to be there. I am a big fan of training being very practical and less theoretical. I've done some training, or I've seen some training where it's very theory heavy, and it's not, people just aren't clicking with it because they're going, okay, that sounds lovely, but what does that mean for me? What does that mean? And that engaging piece, I know we're doing a webinar today, it's a different type of learning, but typically when I'm doing learning, it is very experiential. There's lots of opportunity to practice, to talk about it, to reflect on it. And we're really looking at how they can walk away outside as soon as they leave that room, or that online virtual room, that training. So I think that's the first thing that we've got to look at. And I then, following on that, do people have time to reflect? Or is it straight on with it? Are we giving prompts for people to reflect? There's a lot of research that says you've got to reflect within 24 hours of that learning and think about, how does this apply to me, and what am I going to do differently? Okay, and that
Yeah.
really comes from a growth mindset then. What are the mindsets of the individuals that we have in the business? And does the wider culture promote that? Okay, so that comes down to hiring. It comes down to how our leaders are leading, and I'll move on to leaders in a second. So if we don't have people who are open to change, open to doing something different, trying a new way, it's very easy for us to get stuck in our old ways. Then people are going to find that really hard in terms of implementing that learning. And then finally, it comes down to the leaders and the culture of the business. Are our leaders encouraging people to learn, or are they just going back to work? Or no, that's not how we do things here. Are they walking the talk? And I think we're going to talk a bit more about leaders shortly. But and are they giving people the space to learn? Certainly in the
Mhm.
environment that I work in, every 6 minutes is counted. So it's a billing culture, and often that takes over learning. So it's a bit of a tough cycle that we find ourselves in because we want things to grow and people to improve, but there's sometimes no space for learning.
Wow. So it's rarely one issue, is what I'm hearing. It may be the relevance of the learning, how engaging it is, the mindset of the learner, so that a bit of ownership there, the culture they're returning to afterwards. And the really interesting thing you added as well, that idea of if we're not reviewing, reinforcing, looking back at what we've just picked up within that first 24 48-hour period that you brought up is called the forgetting curve by Ebbinghaus. And it's fascinating because if we don't review it, apparently we could forget up to 80% of it. So that's how powerful that is. And that could just be the phrase we often hear, out of sight, out of mind. It could just be keeping a workbook sitting out or keeping something out that in your ice or wherever you happen to work beside your workstation at home or in the office. So I thought that might be nice if anyone wants to check it out after. So thanks for that, Steph. Learning and development specialists like yourself and many more around the world talk about the 70-20-10 model. Could you explain what it is and why it's relevant for this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And this really comes back to growth mindset, which you'll see in a moment. So 70-20-10 is a really famous model across learning and development, and it's around how people learn. So 10% is formal learning. And that is a foundation. Sometimes people go, why do we have to do the formal learning then if it's only 10% of what we learn? And it's because it lays down those foundations. That's where you get the tools, the frameworks, the tips and tricks, okay? So without that, people are really going to struggle to find them, okay? It's going to take a lot longer through observation and it's going to be a bit of guesswork on what's good and what's not. So that best practice, 10% formal learning is that foundation, that nice concrete foundation. Without that, learning can be a bit wobbly, especially in an organization. 20% is informal learning. So this is when we think about a manager or a peer giving or a client giving feedback. Okay, they'll give feedback on something you've done or a way in which you've approached something. It's someone observing someone. So observing maybe a leader or a peer who's really good in a certain area and how you sit and kind of what you take in and learn from that. It could be just at the desk informal training. Hey, have you thought about that? I just listened to your conversation and perhaps next time you might want to add this in or approach this challenge in this way. So that's 20% is that informal learning at desk level. And a whopping 70% is applying those skills on the job, which is down to the individual. So that is the really important part. And that's what we mean by that implementation. Otherwise, it might just be 10%. If we've got a great team around you, it might be a total of 30%. Okay. But 70% of learning is up to that individual going, what am I going to do differently? And actually doing it, trying things out. And that's not to say someone comes out of a training session and we expect them to do everything all at once. That isn't what we expect at all. We expect people to pick something that resonates with them, they think they'll make a difference, try that out, practice that out. Build confidence with that, then pick the next thing and add on. So it's a bit like building blocks, okay, is how I see learning. Because I think if you look at a whole session altogether, it's a bit overwhelming. And that's, again, probably why sometimes it doesn't stick because there isn't that support to create those building blocks. So yeah, 70%. I often say it's a bit like joining the gym. 10% is the membership fee, 20% is observing people and how to do it and what good form is, and then 70% is actually doing it yourself. So that's where the real difference comes. And it's that consistency in applying what you've learned.
Wow, and that's a nice, helpful example. I think a real world example, the gym one as well. You just want it to happen magically. We forget our part as well. Lots of people I'm sure will relate to that. And what I love about that 70-20-10 model is also on the flip side, the good side that so much sits with us as learners as well, because it is in our control and how we can embed those things as well. But attending the training then is only the beginning, which brings us naturally then to the leaders and everything that sits around that training session, because that's ultimately where people return to. So workplace culture will play a big part as well. So the next question, Steph, what role then do leaders, teams, and organizational culture play in whether that learning will stick or whether it will disappear really quickly?
I think this is often underestimated, this role and the role that leaders and the wider business plays in learning and developing a learning culture. I think the first question is, are they walking the walk or are they talking the talk? Are they learning themselves? And not just in certain industries, not just the formal CPD that they've got to do, although there is lots of learning in formal CPD, okay? But are they coming back and talking about that, sharing with their teams? Are they implementing that learning? Are they joining in the professional skills learning? Are they doing their own courses? Are they making time for themselves to learn? But importantly, as leaders, you've got to share that amongst your team. Because if you're just doing it in the background and no one really knows, then how does that become a normal thing to take time out to learn? Okay, so if they're just going, you must do this, but you're not doing it yourselves, then people go, well, you're not doing it, so why should I? So I think that's really important. And are they modeling that growth mindset? So when they make mistakes, do they share that mistake and what they've learned? Often we have this thing as a lead, and actually being a leader is an interesting one. We're talking about people in leadership roles because I think leadership can be seen at any level in a business, but we're talking about people within leadership roles. Are they modeling that growth mindset? So are they sharing the mistakes? Are they saying, oh, I've always done it this way, but actually I went to this course or I attended this training session and they spoke about it this way. So actually when I give you feedback, I'm going to be trying something a bit different. That is so powerful as a leader to be able to do that. Simple things. Do they know what training their teams have? There's a lot of leaders out there where the teams are signing up for their own training and their leaders probably don't even know what's coming up that week or that month. Are they sitting down in the weekly meetings and going, who has training coming up? What's the training about? Why was it that made you join that training in the first place? Or are they saying, hey, I've seen this training, I think this would be really powerful for you to go to, this is why. And then and I've already said this question a few times to see if the listening have picked it up on it, but based on what you've learned, what are you going to do differently? So I say to leaders, if you can just start asking that question, that helps with that reflection time, okay, and that reflectiveness of the learner. So yeah, I think they play a huge part. And when you start getting all leaders that are doing this, and it'll look slightly different in each team with different personalities, but it's those behaviors that drive that learning culture. Okay, yes, absolutely take that time on that Tuesday to go and do that learning. That's really important. But learning, especially in an environment like I work, where billable times, it weighs a lot of pressure on people. If people are taking that time out and then it's not sticky, they're not implementing that learning, and it does become a waste of time. So that's where the leaders and the individuals themselves play a really huge part in making sure that time they took out to do the learning isn't just a waste of time.
I completely agree with all of that, Steph. It's such a critical component of whether or not that training will stick. So adding on to your thoughts there about the fact that the leaders should almost embrace this curiosity and excitement about invite or ask those questions as well as invite them back from what are you going to do differently? What did you learn? How can this help us every day in the business? Excited about it because it's a huge investment normally for businesses to either have workshops online, face to face. So then there should be a real interest in them knowing why they've got it. What was the trigger? Why was that workshop booked? And also, it's quite important that they know in terms of it sticking and in terms of people being engaged, what time of the day, what time of the week, what time of the month have they scheduled that training for? Is there a huge demand on people? And you'll get this step. Had it in the past. I know I've had it, but I'm sure my colleagues have had it as well, where people are distracted or they're switched off or there's other pressing and they can't give their full attention because thing is pressing as well. So I think the timing as well of the training can be quite important. So that timing of the training and then the curiosity on behalf of the leaders. And hopefully it'll move up the line as well. Sometimes we have people on our communication workshops who'll say, but why am I learning about short sentences and short paragraphs? My manager doesn't write like that. They will never write like that. I don't see it being modeled. And again, that importance of role modeling things, and especially it has to be a culture wide almost. In our world, plain language culture wide, in your world,
I
lots
find
of people.
the leaders understanding and knowing the content's a really interesting topic actually, because I think if you were starting a startup and it's a really small business, you could do that probably a lot easier, where you're saying there's this training program coming up. We want all of our leaders to know what the content is, what the themes are, what the tools are, because this is us as a business and this is how we want you to work. Whereas I think when you're trying to build something in an existing larger company, it's hard. And I think it is important to be sending out the slides or to be sending out the tools and frameworks to leaders. But then are leaders reading that email? Are they looking, are they attending the workshops for themselves and trying to do something different? And I think feedback's a lovely example of that. How are they giving feedback? Are they using a model that helps people grow and it's constructive and it's very collaborative feedback, and your coaching models underpinning that? Or are they just using very blunt, direct feedback or very vague feedback and people don't really understand it? Or are they not giving feedback at all? So I think leaders or people in leadership roles, leading teams really need to get behind, okay, what are you delivering? I'd love to know more about that. And how can I implement that? And you can even empower people in your team to say, okay, come to the next meeting. I want you to teach the key tools and frameworks that you learn.
Yes.
One, that's a great thing for the learner because it's great reflection. They're having to prep beforehand. We all know when we peer learning, when someone is repeating and breaking down what they're doing, it sticks more and it's more likely to be embedded in their day-to-day. So that kind of ticks so many boxes, as well as a leader being able to see what they're learning. It's not really taking up any extra time or much extra time, and they're able to go, oh, maybe I can implement that.
Yeah, and that participant or learner, whoever it happens to be in that moment, feels the organization's valuing the thing. And again, that sense of shared purpose in doing the training for whatever trigger had kicked it off to begin with. That leads us on to another exciting part of it. So we know reflection, as you mentioned, was a huge, critical part of learning. As AI becomes more commonplace in workplaces, how could it support people in building on what they've learned, Steph?
Oh, this is an interesting one. Very hot topic. I feel like there's no webinar ever safe from the topic of AI these days. I went to an event for L&D professionals just over a month ago, and there's a couple of us who always go together, and we had bets on how many minutes it would take for the topic of AI to come up. So we've done quite well here, Una. It's been nearly 20 minutes. Look, I think AI is really powerful, and it does depend, obviously, on what AI you've got implemented. There are some better than others, I get that. But one thing that I've done, because I love the Right Group Plain Language toolkit, I've uploaded that onto my AI. I've personalized my AI. So I know every time I'm writing emails or creating some written content, I want it to follow the frameworks of plain language. And there's some in particular that I like are really key to what I do, such as certain headings and the MADE framework, etc. But you could do that with anything. If you like a feedback framework, we use something called Sabia in the company that I work for, and you could upload that and say to it, okay, write me an email following this, or here's my email. Can you rewrite this, but tell me where I've missed the plain language framework, why you've changed what you've changed. So you're actually asking it. So it's a bit like if a leader sat down with you and give you feedback, can you tell me why I need to change that? What did I do wrong? What had I missed? And then you can read that feedback. Okay, give me feedback on what I have written based on plain language. Put a feedback model in there. I've got a conversation coming up. This is how I would probably have it. And most AIs now, you can actually talk into it rather than typing. So it's often easy just to talk into it and then say, okay, tell me how I could have this differently based on the tools and frameworks and why that would work better. So you're feeding it the tools and frameworks that you've learned, and you're giving it how you might work, and you're okay, what should I do differently and why? And then having that pathway, I think, is a really great way to follow and help implement that learning.
Definitely. And things like even asking, uploading your handwritten notes if you've taken handwritten, a summary of those as well can be helpful. Asking it to put into a checklist. If you, at Right Group, we adore checklists. You will get checklists for everything from feedback to plain language standard to absolutely everything, creating a useful infographic, whatever it might be. But different ones, if you're at a different type of workshop and you don't get those things, then that can be quite nice as well. Or ask it to ask you questions on what you, or give you a individual learning plan or make some pathway for you over the next 10 weeks to help you embed some of those so you get ideas around what you've learned. So we're coming close to the end, and I can see some questions popping into the chat. So I guess the thing we'll be wanting to know is overall practical tips people can start doing immediately after a workshop or a training session, whether that's online or face-to-face, Steph, that would actually improve the chances of that learning. What would you say would be your words of wisdom to wrap that up?
Yeah, so as a trainer, I can see some of the questions here, and I'm internal, so I have that access to leaders, and it's constant messaging, constant one-to-ones, really aligning what I'm teaching to the outcomes and the business strategy. I have that privilege. Those are external trainers don't. So we've got to look at the sessions ourselves, which is one of the first things I talk about. How are we running the sessions ourselves? So have you worked with the business and done a really clear needs analysis? What problem are they trying to solve? Because often it's, oh, can you do a session on this? But a really great partner and leader, and I work with these partner and leaders, spend time, our external providers, they spend time with me to really understand, what am I trying to change here? What am I trying to improve? Rather than just going, oh, you want a session on this? Sure, I'll do it. Understanding what that is and advising on actually the best way. And sometimes that's challenging what they actually need. You run a session, it's got different names, peer feedback, or we call it setting the standard, or writing feedback. But when we look at writing, we have a writing course for our people, but we are also introducing a course for leaders. And how are they giving instructions? How are they telling teams what to write? How are they giving the feedback? Because often we say they never get it right, and it's constant back and forth and improving. And then I look at the feedback that they're getting, and it's just red pen. So we're introducing something to fix that problem. And that actually lies with the leaders or the people giving the feedback, not with the individuals themselves. So I think that's a really important starting point. Then within the session, it's got to be experiential. We've got to be hitting different learning styles. So you've got to have great slides. Now, we all know that slides shouldn't be full of writing and very heavy. So do you have a workbook to send afterwards with those key tips and tricks, and say to people, don't worry, you will get that workbook if it's a virtual session, or if it's you give the workbook in the session so they can see the detail in the workbook versus the slides, for example. Okay, I think that's a great tool. Having opportunities where people can discuss in groups, in small groups, because often in a big group, sometimes it's just the loud ones. Are you setting expectations? And as an external facilitator, this is how I work. I want all cameras on. I don't want disruption. I will call out people who are quite clearly not online, and you can see they're on the emails. Do we have that agreement? Because in my business, it was a bit of a shock to the business coming in. It was the same with my old company, but I'm very much, cameras are on, your mics are ready to use. I will pick on people, and I will call you out if it looks like you're distracted. Okay, now obviously things come up and you've got to be a bit empathetic, especially in the world that I work in. Emergencies do happen, especially when dealing with clients, but most things can wait an hour or two. Yeah, looking at that. So is it engaging? Is it experiential? Do you have time to discussion, for reflection? Are you setting those right expectations in that learning environment? Face to face is a lot easier because you can literally be like, phones away, laptops away. That's it. And are you giving really clear building blocks? If you are,
Beyond.
yeah. So are you breaking it down? Are you giving them time to go, okay, what is the first thing that you might build on? What's the next thing that you might build on? Because if they go away and think, whoa, that's a lot to build on and learn, that's where they might just go, it's all great, but it's too much. So are you breaking it down for them and handing them those building blocks and giving them maybe a suggested pathway for learning?
I think this is super, Steph, and you're already covering some of the questions because we're coming close. The 30 minutes always disappears. So Steph has outlined there one of the questions, the factors within our control that we can do as trainers to make it stick, and as external facilitators, a lot of facilitators asking the same thing, what can they do during the session? And it's like Steph said, be very clear on the purpose of the workshop, be an analysis of it. Is it the right workshop? Is it the right need being addressed? Have it structured, have it clear, recap regularly throughout those things as well. And then afterwards, Steph talked about the scaffolding, the building blocks. We have the plain language standard, the 10 principles. And I often tell people, if this is completely new, take this as a 10-week professional development beyond this session. So you're going to look at purpose and some of the prompts we've told you about that week 2, then your content, then your structure, then your headings, then your paragraphs, your sentences, your words, to make it more manageable for people so they don't feel overwhelmed in a world where there's a lot of cognitive load. And that brings us on to the last question, Steph, which I'll ask you. So AI can help us as a thought partner, too busy talking about patterns. So Steph, the last question there, with people using AI more, how do we combat losses in learning from people that are outsourcing their thinking to it?
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, this is happening a lot. I think it comes back to really great AI training. AI for quite a few years now. And the way in which I use it is from the learning which I've done. So I've listened to a lot of podcasts, I've watched a lot of videos around the use of AI. And I'm very back and forth with it. It's sharing ideas, it's thinking best practice, doing research. It's using it as almost a teammate, but ultimately I'm doing the final edits and making the final decisions. And it's how you've set it up. But we all know most AI is there to agree with us. So that's a huge challenge. We all know about AI hallucinations. So it comes down to really great learning. And actually, that learning needs to be quick because as soon as you allow people to go off, people are going to start making those bad habits. So what learning do you have available? And I strongly recommend live learning and not just e-learning around this, and really showing them the difference in the outcomes.
Yes.
So here's a basic prompt and what you're going to get. Here's what you're going to get if you actually use it as a thinking partner and not just to do your work. And you've got to set the standard to be, this is how we expect people to work and this is how you're going to do it. Now, like with anything, people are going to do what they're going to do. So that is where leaders have got to be on top of how people are using it, what they're using it for, quality checking what's going out and having discussions around that. But I think it comes down to really great learning and really great scaffolding. I've got a lot of people. I'm not in charge of the implementation of AI in our business, but I get so many people asking me, how are you using it? What are your top tips? I'm doing these external courses, and actually people are doing external courses, which is great. And people who would probably call themselves technophobes, but they want to get ahead of it and have heard all these great things and how it's going to make their lives easier. And the one thing I say is you need to use it as a learning partner, but yeah, it comes back to that training and how you're delivering that. And you mentioned time, and are you doing things at the right time? Got to get things out quick with AI. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of mistakes made really early on.
And one final thing I'll add to everything Steph you've said is that your AI output will reflect the quality of your thinking, but it'll expose the lack of thinking or it'll expose the human in the loop. Was there a human in the loop or not? It can be quite obvious. As Steph says, you get the right training, you know what to look for. And at Right, we do a lot of those workshops to really reinforce quality matters. Human judgment matters, and there's a lot we can hold on to as humans there in the driving seat as well, so that we don't outsource everything. We do need the human very much in there. And that in itself, if we reinforce that thing, will hopefully combat the losses and learn. So keep on that last note, I would probably say quality matters. So hold on to your own thinking as well, but indeed use AI where you can at the right places, in the right places, to enhance your writing as well as a thinking and thought partner. So unfortunately, we have gone 2 minutes over. It's all the time for today. Steph, thank you for sharing your time, your insight, and your practical advice. Thank you as well to everyone who joined and gave us your valuable time. As always, we'll send a follow-up email with the recording, useful resources, details on how to connect with Steph, information about upcoming Write Group workshops as well. So thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the very near future at another Write Group event online. So take care, everyone, and thank you. And thanks again, Steph.
Thank you, Una.